darkness closes in and you can't find your way, the doubts you drag around only seem to say, how can you make it on your own? Remember, you're never alone. And lean into me, I will raise you up and gather your faith, and we'll walk on water and hold out your hand when you can't go on. Just let go and lean into me. You're longing to be filled with peace that overflows, to hear my quiet voice. Just be still and know, in every sacred silence, it's only a whisper away. And lean into me, I will raise you up and gather your faith, and we'll walk on water and hold out your hand when you can't go on. Just let go and lean into me. And with every leap of faith, there's a risk you may slip and stumble. But leave what you've known behind, out on the edge you'll find. I won't let you fall. Lean into me, I will raise you up and gather your faith, and we'll walk on water and hold out your hand when you can't go on. Just let go and lean into me. Just let go and lean into me.
I think you just owe it to the world every once in a while to sing that song. And somebody cleaned up this thing and got rid of my Kleenex. That's just how very sweet of them. Pass some more out. We might want them. So the theme for this month is wholeness. I didn't even, and I planned this like a year ago. And I was going to talk about getting a whole new idea of God, which we need. For any of you, we'll talk about that. But what I was going to do in 2 talks, I'll just do next week. Because we can always upgrade God. God 2.0, 9.6, something like that. To get a more holistic idea of God. But I love it. It's amazing how wisdom shows up the same time in the same place. In Greece, above the temple of Delphi, that said, there was a saying that said, "Know thyself, and you'll know your God." And Confucius said something very similar. When you know yourself, you'll know the universe. Amazing, from 2 different places. So perhaps we're going to get a bigger God and know God by getting to know ourselves a little bit today. Because how many of you have had some feelings inside yourself recently? I hope you don't avoid those feelings, because they're you. And therefore, if we believe in one God, that God shows up as you and the way you show up is just fine, no matter how you feel. It's just fine. So, how many of you, check inside, have felt a little bit fractured recently? So this whole idea of wholeness is like, Wah? Well, good. Not good that you feel that way, but good that you're here and that we can come together and perhaps discover some wholeness together. So I want to share my experience of last week. Oh, there's so much I want to share. I want to share my experience of last week by sharing with you someone else's experience from probably 90 years ago. See, we think that, how many of us think that, it's never happened before? Listen to this story. This is actually told in a book called Leadership in the New Science by Margaret Wheatley. And what she's doing is quoting, who is she quoting? I don't know, Capra. And in a book called The Turning Point. In the 20th centuries, physicists faced for the first time a serious challenge to their ability to understand the universe. Now let's just stop right there. How many of you were seriously challenged to understand your universe? Every time they asked nature a question in the atomic realm or through an atomic experiment, nature answered with a paradox. And the more they tried to clarify the situation, I just guess I haven't asked it clearly enough. Every time they tried to clarify the situation, the sharper the paradoxes became. In their struggle to grasp the new reality, scientists became painfully aware that their basic concepts, their language, their whole way of thinking were inadequate to describe the atomic phenomena. Their problem was not only intellectual, but it involved intense emotional and existential experience and trauma. How many of you may know some people that have gone through that? They're on your Facebook feed. It took these physicists a long time to accept the fact that the paradoxes they had encountered are the essential aspect of atomic physics. Once this was perceived, the physicists began to learn to ask the right questions and to avoid contradictions, and finally they found the precise and consistent mathematical formulations of quantum theory. They could not find that until they stopped arguing with what was in front of them. Now here's how they argued what's in front of them. Electrons are matter, but they show up as a wave. No, they're matter. No, they show up as a wave. Okay, well, maybe they're a wave. No, now they're matter. Now they're a wave. Now they're matter. They can't be one. They can't be the other. They've got to be one thing, but not, they're two things. How many of you have had that experience the last week? It can't be this way. It can't be this way. This is the way it should be. This is the way it should be. How can they feel that way? How could they think that thing? How could they say those things? Does it make sense? How many of you have been there? We won't ask the right questions until we start to say, well, guess what? It's just happening. They had to ask different questions. They were forced to ask different questions because nature wasn't changing. Not done. Oops. Even after the mathematical formulations of quantum theory were completed, its conceptual framework was by no means an easy thing to accept. Its effect on the physicists' view of reality was truly shattering. The new physics necessitated profound changes in concepts of space, time, matter, object, cause, and effect. And because these concepts were so fundamental to our way of experiencing the world, their transformation came as a great shock. Heisenberg said, The violent reaction to the recent development of modern physics can only be understood when one realizes that here the foundations of physics have moved and the ground is no longer solid beneath our feet. How many of you have experienced that? It's like, I went to bed thinking one thing would happen and I woke up. No, I wasn't woke up. I saw that it wasn't happening the way that I wanted to, so I went into denial, put earplugs in, and tried to sleep. But I was woke up by the bombs bursting in air in my neighborhood as people celebrated. I live in Snohomish County. The guy drives by with a Confederate flag flying from his truck. And I'm saying, what world do I live in? Because, here's it, people should think the way I think. Doesn't everybody think the way I think? They do on my Facebook feed. It's like, no, electrons are matter, but they show up as a wave. How can that be? I'm smart. I know how things are, but they're not. How can that be? Shaking, shattering, moving, unstable, more instability. How can that be? How many of you have felt unstable? Then I will have a suggestion for you, and it also comes from just the physical universe, and that is that when you are in an unstable environment, the best thing to do is not look down. If people get car sick, they sometimes get even more car sick if they're reading, but if you look out, you get less car sick. When I was learning to cross-country ski, and it took me a long time because I wanted to look down. I knew I wasn't very coordinated, so I was always looking down, so I wanted to see where the curves were so I could put my skis in the right place. I wanted to see the bumps and get prepared for them. It wasn't until I finally did something and started looking out that the skis took care of themselves, and I skied because I was looking out. Somehow, my body changed when I looked where I wanted to go. Instead of looking at what the issue was, I was going to get that bump. No, the bump got me. And the same thing with horseback riding. If I want to really ride well with the horse, I have to know where I want to go. The horse reads it somehow, and we go that way, instead of me controlling every foot and wanting it to just put it in the right place. And, the more I just concentrate on me and what's happening right now, the less we ride well together. I have to look out. I have to look out. What I suggest that you do is you look up. You look up to something greater than yourself, and it becomes sort of your horizon that keeps you stable while things rock. I said this first service, and I wasn't going to say it this service, but you know what? I don't really care. Because I'm going to tell a story about somebody that Mabe watched this. He's actually said, I watch you sometimes, and you look better as a blonde. So here's the story. I was married to what I thought was the perfect man. We had fun together, we laughed together, we had similar interests, and everything was perfect. He allowed me to go to ministerial school, and I say allowed because, it's a very expensive process, and I was in ministerial school. In fact, I was actually in my spring term, which is right before graduation, and some woman called from Florida and said that she'd been having an affair with him for a year. What a shock. But something really weird happened, I guess because I was spending so much time really asking myself, am I ready? God, am I ready? Can I serve? I was so looking up that what happened was, at that moment, the shock happened, and then something took over, and I had compassion for her because I knew that she would never leave him. And I was sorry that she had to go through this. All of a sudden, it wasn't about me. It was about her and him, because I knew he was going to, wonder if he could come home. All of a sudden, I was a different person. And I said out loud, you're right, God, I guess I am ready to be a minister. Because when you're constantly looking up, things can shake. And you don't fall. You don't fall. Now, we've had a collective shake, and yet I also know, because I hear, and you tell me sometimes, and then I hear through the grapevine, there is shaking going on, brothers and sisters. We can't control shakes. We can find a place to balance through them. And we'll never balance if we're looking down. We'll never look down, and looking down is, what did I do? What did they do? What could we do? Blah, blah, blah. No, where do you want to go? What do you want to have happen? If you look up, I'm going to share with you 5 steps that you can take to move through this with grace. How many of you would like to move through anything with grace? Whether it's the transition in the government, or it's the illness of your best friend, the loss of a job, a child moving away from home. For those of you that would like to move through this with grace, this talk is for you. And I think that was me, and I love it. That's why, to get there, to get to the place of seeing good. Because this is not about squinting. And being half blind, and then saying it's good. You're going to run into something if you do that. Here's what I would suggest. If you look up and you look out, I suggest then you let your actions follow that, and you always take the high road. Always take the high road. It will be easier if you're looking up. Don't get caught up in crazy talk. Don't get caught up in what ifs and fear. Because that's looking down. That's what I got caught up in. When I was skiing and couldn't ski, I was caught up in, what if a bump happens? What if I can't stay in the tracks? What if and I would always fall. See, here's the deal. The book of Ruth says, in a story about a woman who was faced with thinking she was insignificant compared to the king, and yet she really wanted to stand up for her community, which was the Jewish population. Her uncle and mentor said, maybe you've been called for such a time as this. Maybe you have been called for such a time as this. Maybe you've been called for such a time as this. Let's look at it this way. What doesn't work is to put all of our eggs in a presidential basket. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked for a very long time. Nobody lives up to our expectations, no matter who you voted for. Even the person that seemed to be so popular, their popularity plummets when people realize they can't possibly do what they expected them to do. this work, this policy, this way of living, this way of running our lives will always hurt us. Is it time to not be hurt? Is it time to stop thinking they can solve a problem? They don't have the power to save a problem. You know who does? The people. So instead of putting all of our power into a leader, are you willing to be a leader? Are you willing? Are you willing to be a leader? You. I've said this so many times, but you know what? I bet you honestly thought that Hillary would do it for you. And if you didn't think Hillary would do it for you, then you thought, well, Trump will do it for you. He won't. No one has. No one could. That's like the quantum physicist saying, the electron, it should be matter, but it's a wave. The president should make a difference, but they don't. Can we just do another test? No, it's 4 years, then we'll get them. And I don't want to downplay what's happening. What I want to upplay is our ability to create our own existence. When you own that, the universe can flow through that. People were saying, love trumps hate. Well, then why did we vote for this way? Why people voted for hate? No, they didn't vote for hate. No one votes for hate. That's an accusation that we see and we think about, but most likely they were voting out of fear. Like we could react out of fear. If you're willing to give up the crazy talk and step into your spiritual magnificence, then you start to be the leader in the world in which you walk. And then we foster a country of leaders. See, when things are going all right, we just give it up. But there's way too much in the world to go on, no matter who's elected and what party's in charge. There's way too much going on that can allow any of us to sit back and say, I don't count. It doesn't work. So if you're willing to take the high road and you're willing to say, I'm the leader I've been looking for, then you go to the next step, which is to look out and see who you can help, bless, or encourage. What I found when I was going through my grief, and actually I have to just admit this, there have been 3 times I've been shaken. No, only once. The affair, 9/11, and this election, I was more shaken by this election. Why? Because I couldn't believe that people didn't see things the way I saw things. It shook the way that I thought the world worked. And it broke my heart open. And then all I wanted to do was use my heart to help other people. So in all sorts of ways, I've been reaching out to people to help them feel better. Because when they felt better, I felt better. There's someone in front of us. There's someone in front of us, always in front of us, that can use who we are. Use who we are, not what we're given, but who we are. If it's love, they can use that love. If it's inspiration, if you're inspired, they can use that inspiration. There's always someone that can use what we show up as. And boy, it feels better. I put on my Facebook page that that I feel better when I think of others' welfare. When I was reaching out and thinking of them, I definitely felt better. After we decide that we're the leaders that we've been looking for and we start to move into action about that, the next thing to do is to find a purpose to live for. A purpose greater than yourself. It becomes your new North Star. Now let me give you a little more science. I love science. So how many of you have heard of chaos theory? Oh, it's a great thing. So scientists got so sophisticated, they started studying chaos. And the way they studied chaos, I don't know if I need to read this. I've got my readers if I need to. So the way they started studying chaos is because chaos is usually so huge, like the chaos of the universe and the chaos that happens when things fall apart. So what scientists did is that they programmed computers to duplicate chaos by having them do the computers do random dots on a screen. But they speeded it up so that there could be like 20 dots in a second. So what you're seeing is chaos condensed in time so you can actually watch it. Now you would think, the way that I think the world should work, is that eventually the whole screen is filled with dots. How would you think about that? Or at least equally distributed dots, right? Chaos, right? No. What they found is that a pattern emerged and then the dots stuck to the pattern. That pattern that emerges in chaos, according to science, is called a strange attractor. And the scientist that named it said, we thought it was a good name because it's very strange. So pattern emerges out of chaos, and every time they do it, the pattern is different. It's not the same pattern. There's not some sort of universal pattern, but there is a pattern that wants to emerge when things are falling apart. So this idea of chaos and strange attractors was taken on by Margaret Wheatley, who is an organizational manager, an organizational specialist. And she was watching organizations break apart and go into chaos. They could go into chaos because of a merger. They could go into chaos because it was the end of the widget they were making. Chaotic. And what she saw is that some companies pulled through. And the companies that pulled through were the ones where people held a meaning for what they were doing. And all of a sudden, that meaning became a strange attractor and brought resources to it. What if we're being called to be a strange attractor? But you can only get that if you decide that I'm the leader I've been looking for. What if we are the place where something coalesces and forms a pattern around us? I'm talking us. What occurred to me is that wouldn't it be interesting if we agreed on a meaning, and here's the meaning for me. The meaning is, how can I live in such a way that I love one another? What if that becomes my strange attractor? And it's already starting to play out because I got my nerve up and walked. I was afraid. In fact, I can't even say I walked. I drove my car so I could leave early. But I drove over and met my neighbor, the one with the Confederate flag. So I just wanted to see who this person was. You know what he talked about? He didn't talk about politics. He talked about how much he loved his 3-year-old son. And I'm watching him spend every weekend making little tracks for his little son to take this teeny little dirt bike around in the property. What if loving one another was a strange attractor? What if it could bring some sort of order out of what I could judge as chaos. Which leads me to the next thing. If we're going to love one another, then we have to ask, as we're looking up, how can I do that? What's mine to do? What's mine to do? Not what they should do. What's mine to do? What I woke up with is, and truly, I got this downloaded in a dream, and I had to wake up, and I still haven't got the whole thing done yet. But all I could dream about was compassion action networks. Compassion action networks. Can. I can. We can. Compassion action networks. And that very same day, Carol Mastenbrook, where's Carol? Oh, stand up. Here's Carol. Carol came up with the idea of starting a social justice ministry. And if you would like to be a part of that, then she's there. She'll take your name, and they're going to start meeting and discussing how that could happen. So how can we minister to people who are feeling marginalized? How can we make sure they know we are there with them? You are not alone, no matter what. No matter what. Part of a compassion action network. And action and compassion, it's like a redundancy, because love is just a Hallmark card until it goes into action. It's just, you can feel it, but if you don't move it, it doesn't become rich and powerful. It doesn't become the Word of God made flesh. The Word of love made flesh. Compassion is that. Then, if we're willing to allow ourselves to have a purpose, like my purpose is to make this place a better place, that we operate out of love. And when I say this place, I mean this place, my community, my neighborhood. And then see how things fall together out of that. Then the next thing is that we start to honor everyone. Namaste, but even beyond namaste. We honor those people that we don't agree with. We don't have to agree with them. We don't have to condone the actions, but we have to see past the the action to the actor. And the actor is one with that life that we all live. And man, we get to practice that. What a strange attractor. What if we were all trying to see others as that beautiful being that they really are? See, here's the truth. Those people who hurt people have been deeply hurt. Abusers were abused. Haters were hated. And they're not going to get over it by hating them more. It's impossible. So those people who are looking up and those people who are saying, I'm all in, then we're in for making love perhaps a strange attractor in our country. Because what's been a strange attractor, and I've watched it over the 40 years that I've even cared about politics, is that the strange attractor has been more and more division, more and more separation, more and more I'm not like them, more and more, more and more we can't possibly meet because you are so ideologically different than me. And you know what? They all have children. And they all love those children. We've got to find the middle ground. No, I have to find middle ground. I have to find it. And then once we have decided that we're willing to honor the beautiful original innocence of everyone, original innocence, clouded over by a whole bunch of unskilled behavior, let's just talk. Because see, I'm not saying we condone anything and we agree with everything. We don't have to agree with everything, which leads me to the next part, the building bridges part. How many of you were here on Wednesday with Rabbi Tid? He said something that will stay with me forever, because after 9/11, Rabbi Ted and Jamal, who is a Muslim cleric and a Christian minister that I don't remember their name, but the three of them called themselves the Three Amigos, and they would go to talk to groups about how these religions have more in common than they have differences. But some people didn't like that. So you know what Rabbi Ted would say to them? He'd say, is there anything I can say to you that would change your mind? And they'd say, no. Well, the same with me. There's nothing you can say that'll change my mind. So now we can have a discussion. Building bridges. I'm not going to talk the guy out of a Confederate flag. He's not going to talk me out of what I believe about the innate goodness of everybody. But if we don't try to change each other, we might agree that his child shouldn't play in the street because it's dangerous. What can we agree on? What if the strange attractor was what we can agree on? Because that would attract things we can agree on. This is called the law of attraction. See, I think some people have said, if love trumps hate, how did Trump win? I'll tell you how it won. The law of attraction. Because what you give your attention to increases, and people, whether they were for him or against him, had all their attention on Trump. We didn't talk about what Hillary could do. We talked to what he might do. Where did the attention flow? He was a strange attractor. And I'm not against that. I'm just talking about, I would have the same conversation if Hillary won. What's the strange attractor there? It's like because if Hillary had won, we'd still have demonstrations in the street. I'm talking about what's going on in our country that is far beyond who was elected. Are we going to have a strange attractor of us cooperating and finding what we have in common and speaking from that and living from that and looking for that? Or are we always going to say they were wrong because that strange attractor has served its time? So there's a song that I'd like to end with. And Beverly's going to come up. And I know some of you just hate singing songs and, doing stuff. Can't I just sit here? You get more excited at a Seahawks game, so get over it. If you've ever gotten excited about a Seahawks game, I want you to get excited about love, right? Yeah. Okay. Good. We could actually have the love wave now.
Yeah, let's do a wave.
Yeah, see, it just doesn't work in Seattle anymore to go, no, I'll just watch. I know who you are. So we're going to start with love. See, if I can love myself so much, and here's the deal. I had the biggest wake-up call, and it was embarrassing as heck. Because I forced myself to do a service on Wednesday, I had to look at myself. I had to look at my reactions, and I realized that if I was reacting severely, there was something in me that was the cause. I mean, it doesn't mean that I had to agree, but my reactions are my reactions, and I had really amazingly big reactions, which made me look inside, and I saw things inside that I would not have seen if Hillary had been elected. And by the way, talking about building bridges, my husband did not vote the way I did. Talk about a bridge. Nor most of my family, nor his. So I can either be right or I can have a healing. But what I notice is in my severe, almost just physical reactions, I had to look inside and saw that, oh, there's some things living in me that have been triggered and exposed. And I hated it so much. No wonder I'd never seen it, because it made me ill. I have this living in me. So I had to love myself. And when I started to love myself and go through that process, then I looked out for other people to love, because love wants to beget love. And then there's a theory that if you give it out enough, all those people who have suffered in some way, that love will start to affect them and raise them up. Because most likely anyone who is hating has been hated and hates themselves in some degree. And the antidote has Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela and Gandhi and Jesus and everybody else. You name it, they say it. The only way to overcome that shit is love. I didn't say that. And then love can beget love, and maybe they'll start loving more. So, those of you that know the song have to stand up. Those of you that don't know it don't have to stand up, but some of them know what's coming. And then, after you've heard it sung a couple of times, then you have to stand up. Here we go.
I love myself so much that I can love you so much, that you can love you so much, that you can start loving me. I love myself so much that I can love you so much, that you can love you so much, that you can start loving me.
Now, think about this. Are you willing to love yourself beyond right and wrong? Are you willing to give up, I'm on the path or off the path? Are you willing to give up the idea that you've made some mistakes that you can never overcome? If you're willing to do that, you can be changed in a twinkling of an eye, because that's the promise. The promise is the universe holds nothing against us. And the only reason that we project out into the world and make ourselves against them is because we are not for us yet. Get it? Are you willing to just be loved? Good, because I want that to be the strange attractor of this community. Got it? So, let's sing it again. I love myself so much that I can love you so much, that you can love you so much, that you can start loving me. Now real soft. I love myself so much that I can love you so much, that you can love you so much,